today is the second part of a little kind of series, really, of two. The first series, or the first sermon in the series was what men wish their wives knew. Can anybody remember anything from that message? What does winner mean? Men want to be a winner. They want to chase, or they do chase, the winning feeling. Yes, anything else we got from that message? Renee. Right, man's primary emotional need is respect. He'll take respect over love every time. Yeah, good. Anything else? Peter. Say that again. They speak less than women. Yes. It is true. In fact, I'll show you some research about that today that'll make you chuckle. It is true. Men speak less. So we do prefer the bullet points when it comes to it. Today we're going to continue and go the other side. I joked before the service that the message, what women want their men to know, I could have just said, who knows what women want? And we could have all gone home early. That would have been easy, but that wouldn't have been much of a message. Shiny things. I won't tell you what Mike texted me this morning. He was being naughty. Albert Ironside said this: men marry women with the hope they will never change. Women marry men with the hope that they will change. Both are invariably disappointed. Well, that's pretty clever. I like that. Women are different from men. Did you know, for example, that a woman's best time in swimming the English Channel is 3 hours better than a man's? That's because she wasn't embarrassed to stop and ask for directions. So some stats about women today. They live 4 to 8 years longer than men. A woman's metabolism is slower than a man's, so it's harder for her to lose weight. So you can use that as an excuse, ladies. I'm not sure what my excuse is. Women have larger kidneys, liver, stomach, and appendix than men. A woman's heart beats faster than a man's, and she can withstand higher temperatures than most men. When I was tutoring psychology, I used to add into that a woman's brain is smaller than a man's, but she doesn't have to keep her ego in there, so she doesn't need it to be as big. Sigmund Freud said, the great question that has never been answered and which I have not yet been able to answer despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul is, what does a woman want? So if you're feeling a little confused, men, about what women want, don't worry, not even the great Sigmund Freud knew. But strangely, the Bible did know. And I like this. This is very comforting to me that the Bible gives us great theological truth, but also gives us really practical life truth. It shows us that our Maker wants us to know Him, but to know each other, and that He knows how He's made us. Ephesians 5:25 says this: husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to Himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Husbands, love your wives. In a sense, we could probably almost just stop there. I think most wives would be very happy if that's what their husband got out of this message today, is that their desire is to be loved. A husband's desire is to be respected. He gets a lot out of how he's perceived. It's very hard for him, for example, to feel love if he doesn't feel respected. If he feels like somehow he is some kind of failure, that his wife looks down on him in some way, it's very hard for him to feel loved by that person. But for women, love is definitely the goal. So we're going to talk about, what does that love look like? How can we learn to love a little better? I'm going to draw on the research a little bit of Shaunti and Jeff Felden. They've written an excellent couple of books, actually. One is called For Men Only, a straightforward guide to the inner lives of women. And their books are built on a lot of research with thousands of people whom they've interviewed. And also they've compared and looked for what the scientific psychology and sociology research says. So they've compiled that all together, so their stuff is very interesting. The particular type of love that they point out that a woman wants most of all is, in one word, reassurance. Is reassurance. That turns out to be the key emotional need for a woman when it comes to love. I want to be sure that you still love me. I want to be sure that you're going to keep loving me. I want to be sure that we're safe, that we're secure. And reassurance is something that men aren't particularly good at. I had a friend, it wasn't a wife situation, but a mum. His mum would say to him, very normally, "I love you," and his answer would be, "Your house is yellow." That was his answer. At 19, that's all he could ever be persuaded to say is, "Your house is yellow," in response. Now, here was his point. I've told you in the past that I love you. If it ever changes, I'll let you know. But asking me for updates on whether I love you is like asking me what colour the house is. The house is yellow. It was yellow the last time you asked, it's yellow today, and it'll be yellow the next time you ask. Do you think he was providing his mum with the kind of reassurance she needed? So here's a tip. Your house is yellow is the wrong answer. Even if your house is yellow, it's the wrong answer. That women's need for love means that reassurance is a primary driver. They want to be sure and get updates on our love. You could never tell a woman that you love her too many times. I've never said I love you to Debbie and had her go, yada, 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 always on with the love thing. Get over it already. Never. That reassurance is key to a woman's heart. And that reassurance can come in many different ways. And of course, particularly in the context of conflict, reassurance is really important. Because a lot of us have been groomed to believe that conflict means that this relationship might be in peril of some kind. And so reassurance can be critical after conflict to go back and to say, you know, I still love you. I'm still here. I'm still committed to us. This argument doesn't mean anything other than the issue that we talked about. Actually, it's been good. It turns out I have quite a high need for reassurance. And so it's been great when some friends have prefaced things with reassurance. You know, they'll start by saying, now look, this isn't about whether I love you. This isn't about whether you're my friend. They'll give me some preemptive reassurance. It's not a bad strategy when talking to your wife to give her some preemptive reassurance. Peter wisely pointed out that men have less words than women, and that means that often when reassurance comes in terms of words, they're not entirely sure what to say. A lot of men are not particularly romantic. I'm not sure what to make of Solomon. Song of Solomon, chapter 6. Ladies, would you like to hear this? Your hair flows and shimmers like a flock of goats in the distance, streaming down a hillside in the sunshine. Does that qualify as romantic? How about this? Your smile is generous and full, expressive, strong and clean. Your veiled cheeks are soft and radiant. Oh, he's getting there now. That's a bit better. But then, next verse, your teeth are like a flock of sheep. Hello? Coming up from the washing. What? Each has its twin, not one of them is missing. You know what I've decided? Song of Solomon is like it being written by a third form boy who's trying to work out what girls are like. And he's, doesn't have a lot of ideas, so he just pretty much names whatever he can see. You're like, goats, sheep. My word. I love this image. This is how his beloved would look if all of the descriptors turned out to be true. Your eyes are like doves, your hair like a flock of goats, your teeth are like a flock of ewes, your lips are like a scarlet thread, your temples are a slice of pomegranate, your neck is like the Tower of David, your breasts are like 2 fawn gazelle, which apparently means they have horns, according to this rendering. But just when I think that maybe Solomon has no idea how to romance a woman, he hits the money shot. Song of Solomon 4 verse 7. Which woman would not want to hear these words? You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Oh, Solomon's a player. He had game after all. That's a great line, isn't it? And so the difficulty for men who don't have as many words is to remember that we're going to have to learn to use your words. The studies show actually that women learn to talk sooner than males do. A study found that 100% of the noises that female toddlers made was conversational. It was always in reference to communicating to someone. But only 60% of boy sounds were to do with conversation. 40% were the noises of animals and machines. Which I thought was just brilliant. So I'm wondering, just to pause here for a second, I could never do the machine gun noise when playing, army as a kid. Can any guy here do the machine gun noise? The decent... Nobody's feeling brave. They all can. They just... So words are important. And particularly when it comes to the relationship between a husband and a wife, that tone is important. And you know how we talked about last time, that for men, respect is a tone. It's hearing a certain tone of voice that doesn't communicate, you're a naughty little boy. That's a tone that most men are pretty allergic to hearing. But there's also a tone issue for men to learn, that love also has a tone about it. After all, if Debbie was to say to me, do you love me? And I was to say, I don't love you. That's not much of a tone, is it? Do you love me? I love you. There is a nurture, there is a tone, and even the Bible encourages men to learn it. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. One of the things that I've certainly observed over the years is the extent to which a woman's heart can close to her husband. And that once it closes, it's often the case that it'll never open again. That she has heard words, that she has heard a tone. And I think, guys, one of the things we have to acknowledge is that for most of us, our physical presence sends a message that we're not often conscious of. When I am grumpy, I become a deep-voiced 6'3" bear. So even though Debbie would, gladly say, I've never laid a finger on her, when my words are angry, my very presence is intimidating. My very existence is scary because I am capable of hurting her. And for a lot of women, that's a presence that their husband doesn't acknowledge, that he is capable of scaring her without touching her. That there can be a look in his eyes, a tone in his voice, a posture in his body that causes her to shrink back and to think, I could be in big trouble here. If this goes south, what's he capable of? And I've observed in talking to many couples now about this, that once a wife is afraid of her husband, her heart closes to him. And he will have to work very hard to convince her that she has nothing to be afraid of. But many of us men who are not necessarily very physical or violent forget that we're usually at the very least taller, bigger, stronger, and therefore the threat we possess is always present. Hence the Bible reminds husbands, don't be harsh. Because once you are harsh, once you choose angry tone, followed by angry words, followed by angry actions, it's a slippery, slippery slope. Because most men who have actually ever hurt a woman didn't start by hurting a woman with their hands. They started by indulging, way back at the beginning, the hurtful tone. That they thought it was okay to speak in a certain aggressive kind of way. And then when they got familiar with that and it wasn't getting the desired response, they ramped it up a little. And they ramped it up a little. And they ramped it up a little. It's very rare for it to skip straight to violence in terms of violent acts. And so here is a real challenge for every man in the room. It was a challenge Debbie and I heard from David Riddell when we did the Living Wisdom training, and that was to make our home an anger-free environment and to declare that anger was off limits. And for this purpose, that nobody has ever loved anyone more because they were angry with them. Nobody has ever been on the receiving end of anger and done this. Well, that's what I needed. I needed to be put in my place. You know what? I was a bit lippy. And thanks to you, I can now see that I shouldn't be so lippy. Full credit to you, buddy. That slap round the head, genius stroke. I don't know what's taking you so long to get around to hurting me. No one has ever felt more loved through anger. Anger only ever kills love. It is a completely unhelpful relational strategy. And I love it. I'm leaving this verse up here. The Bible says, husbands, do not be harsh with your wives. Remember, your capacity for anger poses this constant threat to the relationship. So, as a man of God, to dedicate yourself to being a nurturing, caring, soft husband will keep the heart of your wife open. And remember this, that anger is the false power I reach for when I'm feeling afraid. It's not what powerful people do. What powerful people do is say what needs to be said. What angry people do is get afraid and figure, well, maybe if I just puff my chest out enough or raise my voice loud enough, I'm going to finally get what I need. Turns out anger is the power that people reach for because they feel like they don't have power, because they feel afraid. And so therefore anger is off limits in our house. And you know, Debbie and I have had our disagreements over the years, no doubt. 15 years of marriage, you can't get through without some disagreements. But you know what? Hand on heart, Debbie, tell me if I'm wrong, but we've never used words to hurt each other. We've never said anything to each other that we wish we could take back. Never. There's never that day where I said that thing that would cut her to the quick. It's never happened. Because I realised I would never have to apologise for what I didn't say. And so I realised that final weapon of being harsh would cause a temporary victory, short-term gain, for long-term pain of Debbie's heart closing toward me. And thankfully, we agree not to do it towards each other. What you say affects her deeply. Women forget most of the reasons for arguments, but never the things said during the argument. As a friend of mine said, my wife gets historical. I said, don't you mean hysterical? I said, no, historical. She tells me everything I've ever done wrong. She remembers. Jokes at her expense in front of others are never funny to your wife. They are not nurturing to her. And I'm sorry doesn't mean the same thing when you say it for doing exactly the same thing over and over again. Okay, so now men are thinking, well, I'm going to have to use my words. That could be tough. I'm maybe more inclined to use a machine gun noise, or so I'm not so good with my words. Maybe you could just spend some time with her. That would be a good start. Here is some interesting research. One study reported that in a typical week, the average married couple spends the total of 33 minutes together. 33 minutes over the course of a week. Less than half of 1%. So there's a challenge. To make sure that we carve out that time. As this great quote from Paul Tillich, the German theologian, the first duty of love is to listen. The first duty of love is to listen. And for many women, listening and being listened to feels like love, so much so that they often can't tell the difference. Being listened to is often that expression, that gift of ears and a heart that was open. And many men are not very good at listening. So let's make that a priority, men, to take that time and to prioritize that time to check in and to listen. To listen without distractions, without the sports news on in the background and you're trying to keep an eye on exactly who is in the All Blacks this week. I think Emily must have learnt from one of her teachers this lovely phrase that she uses on me from time to time. She's walked into my office and I'll be sitting on the computer and she will ask me a question and I'll just keep looking at the computer while I'm answering the question. Now I'm thinking, I'm listening, I've answered the question, and a couple of times she's used this one on me. I want to have your eyes and ears. So I suspect a teacher has taught it. I want to have your eyes and ears. And so that's a good cue to me to turn around and to look at her. That it isn't just about whether I heard the words, but whether I connected with the question, connected with her, prioritized her. So listening, that's something, if you're not a good talker, at least you could become a good listener. That'd be a good start. I'm a good talker. So Debbie gets more words than she can cope with. And I hope I'm a reasonable listener, but usually I like to talk. Maybe you could just be a bit more affectionate in terms of loving. I wonder what that would be like. Life insurance companies have found that men who kiss their wives every day before they go to work have fewer accidents on their commute. How about that? They also discovered that men who kiss their wives the last thing before they go to bed at night live longer than other men. And statistics also show that men earned more money at their place of employment if they regularly showed their wife physical affection. Now, Debbie's, one of her love languages is physical affection, and I realise it's the key to getting things. Because there's this spot just in the centre of her back that if I scratch it gently and ask her for something, I can always get a yes out of her. Pretty much she'll say yes to anything. But it usually goes, yes. That's the kind of yes I get if I, yes, oh, yes. Men, listen, the key to practicing this part is to practice nurturing touch that doesn't have to end up in the bedroom. Because for a lot of men, the only time they ever think to be nurturing is when they're feeling rather amorous. Is that the word? That's the code word, amorous. But what most women crave is to know that that nurture isn't just connected to that activity, but that nurture is actually the expression of connection and love and nurture. I've often also tried to encourage husbands who are not particularly gifted in this area of non-sexual touch and remembering to hold hands and to stroke an arm and to give a hug is also, if they want to have an exciting sex life, is to realise that they have not earned the right to go to the bedroom. That this is one of those big differences between men and women. We are pretty much, as men, we are ready 24/7. There is pretty much never a moment where our wife couldn't say, here we go, just let me get out of this hospital bed and I'll be right with you. I mean, we are pretty much always ready. But women, they take a long time to get ready. And they get ready because they feel loved and connected with, that they feel an emotional connection that then they want to express in a physical way. And a lot of men don't seem to know that. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. It's really interesting. I mentioned last time I did this message, I talked about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which were these 4 communication styles that could predict divorce. They were, if you're keeping score, they were contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And when they were present, over 30 years of studies, John Gottman could predict divorce with 96% accuracy. But on the other side, the question was, well, what grows a strong marriage? I mean, those are the features of a marriage that's in trouble. And there are a couple of 7 sort of features that he mentions, and I want to just finish today by mentioning a couple. One of them is, in fact, this nurture issue. He said that couples that actively work to nurture each other have a greater likelihood of going the distance. And in particular, he made reference to this, which I'm not sure if you're aware of. Do you know, if you're in a married couple situation, that if you're the husband, that your wife regulates your heart rate and blood pressure for you? And you do the same for her. That we, in fact, regulate core biological functions in each other. That's how connected husbands and wives are. Their brains literally send information to each other about how their heart rate and blood pressure should be. Don't believe me? Imagine how your heart rate and blood pressure changes when he's angry with you. Oh, well, suddenly that's pretty obvious. But we don't think of it, that actually when things are going well, that regulation is still occurring. And so Gottman points out that couples who go the distance, who have strong and secure relationships, are ones that work hard to learn how to soothe each other. That's why they get through conflict in a way that's more successful than the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse strategies. They work out that when the other person is feeling anxious, that they have strategies for soothing. One of those strategies, for example, might be to briefly change the topic so that the person gets a chance to have some relief from the intensity of an argument, for example. But the point is that couples who are working well together not just nurture but soothe each other. But the thing that I'm really intrigued about, that he says that couples who are the most likely to succeed and have a lifelong marriage have a love map of the other person inside their head. They have taken the time to understand what truly drives and motivates their spouse. And so they literally have a roadmap of the other person's heart in their head. They know their hopes, their dreams, their fears, the most terrible thing that's ever happened, the most exciting thing that's ever happened, what they love the most, what they hate the most. They have that love map internalized. And so they then use that love map to keep navigating towards expressing love and connection. That love map is something that every couple can work on. And so here's the homework for today, is to begin to see how well established that love map is. To ask each other some questions about those things. To express that you actually have heard, that you do understand what their great dream or great fear might be. That it's that kind of connection that is what actually translates often to love. To build up that love map on the inside. So Debbie and I printed off, and you can have a copy, I've got it on my computer at home, a little questionnaire for couples to use to establish how well the love map is understood. And so we sat in the car while we were picking up Lisa from youth group, and we went through the love map, we printed it off, and we were very excited to be able to say, do you know the answer to this? Yes, 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 yes. And the more yeses we got, the more we realised this is actually why Debbie and I have a strong relationship. We have a very strong internal love map of each other. I'm pretty sure the love map thing probably works for friendships as well, but it most certainly works for keeping the heart of a wife open. But if I had to summarise today, it's this. If the heart of a man is that he wants to know that he is a winner, that he is chasing the winning feeling, the heart of a woman is this: to know that you haven't stopped trying to win me. That you're still trying to win me. And that love feels like pursuit. Love feels like this constant endeavour to win the heart of the wife. To never take it for granted. To never just assume that it'll be there forever, but to continue to pursue that heart, to cultivate that heart. And it's a shame, isn't it? Because we live in a culture that presents marriage as a fairly unromantic kind of thing. I mean, when you watch the romantic comedy, usually the married couple, you always see in the supporting role, the married couple is almost inevitably unhappy in some way. And that the basic message of romantic comedies is that all the fun stuff happens before the wedding. That all the fun stuff is trying to win the heart of the girl prior to the big day. But in truth, it should be the beginning of a great romance, not the end. The beginning of this lifelong journey to build up this love connection, to continue to try and win the heart of your wife. And a wife who feels like her husband is constantly pursuing her heart is a happy wife. And you know what they say? Happy wife, happy life. So I wonder, men, if it's time to examine ourselves. Have we stopped trying to win our wife's heart? Have we taken it for granted? What have we done recently that shows that we are still trying to woo her? Still trying to seduce her, to pursue her, to let her know that we are still keen to grab her heart and to hold it, to know it. When I was doing the morning show on Rima many years ago, I used to have Andy and Nikki Bray from Family Life come in every week. And their kind of version of the love map, Andy would put it like this. If knowing your wife's heart was a qualification, what level of qualification do you possess in knowing your wife's heart? Do you have NCEA? Do you have a diploma? Do you have a degree? Do you have a PhD in your wife's heart? It's a good question, isn't it? It's a good way of thinking, you know what? I want to be a study of her. So, in trying to put that into practice a few years ago now, I went to the bank and I asked the teller, is it possible for me to open up a bank account that nobody else can see? She said, yes. I said, I've decided to put away a little bit of money anytime I get an extra job or something so that I can surprise my wife by taking her back to the campground in Nelson that she went to as a teenager called Bethany Park. And I don't want her to know. And she said, oh, I wish I had a husband like you. I said, yes. But it was thrilling to be able to announce then, in November of that year, I've raised enough money to take us all to Bethany Park. And what a thrill it was for Debbie to be able to show the children where she had grown up, to be able to take them to her school, to the park she'd played in, and for us to stay at this place that had been so precious to her during her childhood. And she felt loved not just because I took her to Bethany Park, but because she realized that every time I put money in that account, I was thinking of her. And that was the key. That she had felt heard, connected with, that I had understood what was precious to her. And now I was doing this thing that said I was constantly thinking of her. And so I encourage you men to start building this love map and to find a pathway that gives you the ability to win her heart in a new way that perhaps has never been won before. Let's pray together. Well, Father, we thank you for your wisdom, that your word is so clear that the instruction to husbands is to love their wives. And Lord, that the warning is to not be harsh with them. Because, Lord, we do not want to be men whose words and tone and actions have caused our wives' heart to close down from us. But instead we want to be those whose words and tone and action causes her heart to open and to blossom. and for her to feel like we are constantly trying to find new ways to connect and to win her heart. Lord, I pray today that we would be a community where men and women who live together would begin to minister to those deep needs. That wives would be looking for how to give that winning feeling, and that men would be looking how to win the heart of their wife. And we do this all, Lord, in the covering of your grace and your love, knowing that there are no perfect couples, and that grace says we get a chance to try again, that your mercy is fresh each and every morning. But Lord, we want to try something new. We want to find new skills and new ways to grow together, and we might experience this oneness, so that like Christ and his bride, the church, we might have this oneness with each other. And Lord, I pray for those who, Lord, are not in relationships today. Lord, that you are the one who steps into that space. That you are the one who steps into the heart of a lonely woman and offers this love and this nurture. That you are the one who can be the husband to the one who finds herself without one. And God, I pray as a community that the men of Harvest would be looking out for those women today and realizing that we together as a community can step into that space. That there are things that we can do to communicate love and security. And God, I pray where men and women have heard these messages and only thought of how they have missed it, how they've let the side down, how they've failed in some way. Lord, I pray right now that you would pour out your grace. Lord, that we would experience your mercy and know, Lord, your great love for us. And Father, I pray that you would teach us and instruct us, that our lives might be a witness to our great and glorious King.